Buchanan, McMillan.
Washington, Pennsylvania.
Washington, PA. I knew the area. Mack went to Point Park College for his undergraduate degree. He received a master's degree at West Virginia University, and about 4 or 5 weeks ago received his PhD from WVU as well. So we've got a doctor in the house. Anyway, Mack's been with us for about 1.5 years as our zoologist, and under his purview, he has invertebrates, terrestrial invertebrates in West Virginia, and in terms of survey, inventory, status assessments, what we have, what we don't have, what's missing, how it's doing, et cetera, et cetera. So he's been doing a bang-up job, and this Firefly project is all his own doing. He's real enthusiastic about it. I'm excited about it, and I'd like you to hear what he has to say. So take it away, Mack.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate you all being out here tonight. As I told some of you already, I'm going to tell you more than you ever wanted to know about fireflies. But if you leave here, knowing just a little bit more about fireflies and just starting to know some more in your backyard, then I'll be happy with that. Our citizen science project that we started just this last March is called Light Up West Virginia, and we hope to light up West Virginia with your efforts, documenting fireflies in your backyard and other unique habitat types in the state. And this will be for lightning bugs, fireflies, and glowworms. What exactly are fireflies? Well, they're not exactly bugs nor flies. They should actually be called lantern beetles. They are actually beetles in the family Coleoptera. And they are characterized by having hardened wing covers called elytra, which cover the fragile wings. And, or the order Coleoptera is what they're in, family Lampyridae. And they are different from most beetles that you encounter because they're actually soft-bodied. And you'll notice in a little bit too, that makes a difference in why you find them in certain parts of the United States and not others. And most importantly about fireflies is that they bioluminesce. Now, we actually have a bunch of firefly species that do not flash. They have lost the ability to flash over time. They use chemical receptors in order to find their mates. So technically, fireflies are any beetles that can glow at some point in their life cycle. And so there's a bunch of them, even the ones that can't flash at adults, they can as larvae. So all fireflies can flash as larvae. And the larvae form is a lot different from the adult, which the adult is a very short lifespan of only a few weeks. The larvae, they can be overwinter underground or in the leaf litter for sometimes in some parts of the world for several years at a time. And they basically are little Napoleons. They don't know their own size. They're voracious predators and can overtake things much bigger their size. Firefly adults, they actually don't eat. They do have functioning mouth parts, and you will sometimes find them nectaring on things such as milkweed or other types of flowering plants. But even though they don't typically eat because it's a very short part of their life cycle, and they have only one thing on their mind, and that is to find another mate. We also, it's been documented in recent years that there might be an association with milkweed, that, as you know, milkweed is a very important plant for some of our pollinator species like the monarch. And with the loss of habitat associated with milkweed, and there's also declines in fireflies, we wonder if there's some kind of association there. Fireflies and lightning bugs are actually the same thing. It's like if you grew up in one part of the world saying soda, Coke, pop, that sort of thing. Typically, fireflies are more of a northeastern term, and in the southeast they're called lightning bugs. However, I grew up in Pittsburgh, kind of right around that border, and I've always heard people say lightning bugs. So it's not really any fast set rule, but they're essentially the same thing. how do fireflies actually glow? It's a really amazing process. Took a lot of studies to document, and it's one of the most efficient biochemical processes that we know. Basically, there's a compound produced in a lantern called luciferin, and in the presence of oxygen, energy in the form of ATP and luciferase, which is an enzyme that they produce, that produces the light from the lanterns. It is the most efficient light production of any animal that can glow or produce light at 40%. In comparison, your standard incandescent light bulb loses 90% of its energy as heat. And so it's only 10% efficient, which is really incredible that's going on to these little critters. So how in the world can fireflies do these really brazen displays? Hello world, here I am, and yet they're not preyed on. Well, the reason why is there's been multiple studies that documented around the world that animals find this is one of the most distasteful insects in the world. Animals learn to avoid eating them, and it can cause cardiac issues and also cause death and all sorts of other things. They produce a chemical compound called lucibufficins, which I did not make that up. That's actually what it's called. And basically, you can think of lucibufficins as the same thing as the compounds that bufo toads produce that they secrete from their skin that makes them toxic. So it's very similar to that. And fireflies, they can also do something called reflex bleeding. So essentially, they have leaky valves that if they feel threatened, they can extrude some of this lucibufficins with their blood fluid, if you will, and it is very sticky. And so, like if a spider is trying to go after the firefly, it'll produce some of those lucibufficins, it'll entrap the spider for a second and allow it to get away. And sometimes if you actually catch a firefly, you can smell it, and that's actually what's being produced. It's from that weird smell. Since fireflies are so distasteful and most creatures learn to avoid them, there are many firefly lookalikes in the insect world. You have things called net-winged beetles and also soldier beetles that look very much like fireflies. The way you can tell the difference, though, is that fireflies, they have the ability to hide their head behind this hard head shield called a pronotum. However, these firefly lookalikes, their head always sticks out past the pronotum. They do not have the ability to actually push their head back like a turtle and protect themselves. But you can find these out in your backyard now that they're starting to become a number as the fireflies also peak in your backyard. They know to come out because that's the time that they can also reproduce without actually being preyed on. There are an incredible amount of fireflies in the world, about 120, mostly documented in the southeastern US. And that is because there seems to be a connection with humidity. They actually need a lot of moisture. And you can find some out west, but they're associated with wet areas. And so we actually have the highest concentration, right here, relatively speaking. And I think them being soft-bodied has something to do with it too, that they need that extra humidity or moisture. And if you ever decide to collect them, it's actually good that you keep them contained because they need that extra moisture. You open up the cap every couple days or so, or the tank, to get some fresh air flowing in, but otherwise if you just leave an open air container, they will die because they don't have that moisture. As far as biodiversity for West Virginia, we actually have possibly an incredible amount of biodiversity. Over at the state insect curation that's in Sutton, we have 13 recognized species within the state's collection. However, based on different sources, I estimate there's somewhere between 23 to 41 different species of fireflies. And it has been proven with previous studies that, for the most part, with some exceptions potentially, that each male has its own flashing pattern. So if you see a unique flashing pattern, that constitutes a different species. But we will see in the firefly world, not everything is so easy. There has been a lot of anecdotal evidence over the last couple decades that firefly populations have been in decline. There are some world-renowned people that have worked with fireflies their whole life and have documented this, and there's some concrete reasons why and maybe some anecdotal reasons why. Several decades ago, fireflies, you could actually make money by sending bags full of fireflies to medical chemical companies where it didn't matter what species it was, they would grind it up in order to have the luciferase enzyme. And the luciferase enzyme was used within medical testing supply kits where it would help light up something positive for the presence of that medical compound. But once those companies learned how to synthetically make luciferase, that has stopped. But you can still find the old ads out there for sending your fireflies, you know, so many pounds, you know, get a quarter, that sort of thing. Habitat loss is probably the biggest one right now. They will literally flicker out if you just remove one particular tree, which it might be their host tree for decades on end. Chronic mowing is an issue not only for fireflies but for other pollinator species. Pesticides and herbicides. As I said, fireflies spend most of their time in the ground, the subterranean region, and so any herbicides or pesticides leaching into those areas are potentially affecting those larvae. And also a big one is light pollution. Now, if you want to think about it, it really disorients them. It's like if you were in a dead sleep and then someone flicked the lights on you, you would be freaking out, right? And so in areas of light pollution, you definitely won't find fireflies, with the exception of those that are actually crepuscular, where they come out before it's actually completely dark. And so, you know, a lot of people think fireflies are fine because there's a very common one people see in their backyard right before it gets completely dark, but that one is crepuscular, and so it's not affected by light pollution. And we'll make sure to talk about some of these species like that one. I do have a couple videos I'd like to show. Let's see if this works. One of the species in particular we're looking for in West Virginia is a group of fireflies called synchronous fireflies. This is stock footage taken from the Great Smoky Mountains over by Elmont, Tennessee. And these fireflies, they have learned to synchronize all their flashing at the same time. This firefly has been documented in all states surrounding West Virginia in similar habitat that we have a lot of, which tells me I know it's here. We just need someone to go out there and document it. And I've heard some anecdotal reports of it being over in Doddridge, and I've heard maybe some credible reports of it somewhere in Canaan Valley, which is also very good habitat. But essentially, it is in montane forest, usually at high elevation, with presence of water nearby. And most importantly, there can't be much understory or brush because the fireflies need to be able to see each other displaying. So it has to be a pretty open forest. But like I said, it's been documented everywhere surrounding us. So I would love to see one of you guys be able to find it here. And it's a really incredible opportunity where it is a highly attractive tourist attraction. You actually have to do a lottery, which is only open for a 2-week window to get a ticket. And it sells out almost instantly. So thousands of people go there each year.
a scientist?
So what I'd like to do next before getting into some of your nitty-gritty, there's a TED Talk by Dr. Sarah Lewis. She has studied the reproductive lives of the fireflies, and she has discovered many cool things, and she just has a good way of telling it that I think that you would appreciate seeing it from the video, and that we can discuss it in further depth. She also produced one of the resources on fireflies, came out just recently, called Silent Sparks. And this is not really a field guide, this is more of learning the natural ecology of fireflies. And I highly recommend getting this. It's an easy read, and it really brings to life fireflies. So I figured we'd watch this short 10-minute video, and then we'll get into more about it.
Also, as a human being, I've been trying to make myself susceptible to
Can everyone hear that?
I think Jason Webley last night called it inspiring to be part of the magic. So it's fortunate that my career as a biologist lets me dive deeply into the lives of some truly wondrous creatures that share our planet. Fireflies. Now, for many of you, I know that fireflies may conjure up some really great memories. Childhood, summertime, even other TED Talks. Maybe something like this. My seduction into the world of fireflies began when I was back in graduate school. One evening I was sitting out in my backyard in North Carolina, and suddenly these silent sparks rose up all around me. And I began to wonder, how did these creatures make light? And what's with all this flashing? Are they talking to one another? And what happens after the lights go out? I've been lucky enough to answer some of these questions as I've explored this nocturnal world. Now, if you've ever seen or even heard about fireflies, then you'll know how magically they can transform our everyday landscape into something ethereal and otherworldly. And this happens around the globe, like this hillside in the Smoky Mountains that I saw transformed into a living cascade of light by the eerie glows of these blue ghost fireflies. Or a roadside river that I visited in Japan as it was giving birth to slow, floating flashes of these Genshin fireflies. Or in Malaysia, the mangrove trees that I watched blossom nightly, not with flowers, but with the lights of 1,000 peep fireflies, all blinking together in stunning synchrony. These luminous landscapes still fill me with wonder, and they keep me connected to the magic of the natural world. And I find it amazing that they're created by these tiny insects. In person, fireflies are charming. They're charismatic. They've been celebrated in art and in poetry for centuries. As I've traveled around the world, I've met many thoughtful people who've told me that God put fireflies on Earth for humans to enjoy. Other creatures can enjoy them too. I think these graceful insects are truly miraculous because they so beautifully illuminate the creative improvisation of evolution. They've been shaped by two powerful evolutionary forces: natural selection, the struggle for survival, and sexual selection, the struggle for reproductive opportunity. As a firefly junkie, the past 20 years have been quite an exciting ride. Together with my students at Tufts University and other colleagues, we've made lots of new discoveries about fireflies. Their courtship and sex lives, their treachery and murder. So today I'd like to share with you just a couple of tales that we've brought back from our collective adventure into this hidden world. Fireflies belong to a very beautiful and diverse group of insects, the beetles. Worldwide, there are more than 2,000 firefly species, and these have evolved remarkably diverse courtship signals, that is, different ways to find and attract mates. Around 150 million years ago, the very first fireflies probably looked like this. They flew during the daytime and they didn't light up. Instead, males use their fantastic antennae to sniff out perfumes given off by their females. In other fireflies, it's only the females who light up. They're attractive, plump, and wingless. So every night they climb up onto perches and they glow brightly for hours to attract their flying but unlit males. Still other fireflies, both sexes use quick, bright flashes to find their mates. Here in North America, we have more than 100 different kinds of firefly that have the remarkable ability to shine energy out from their bodies in the form of light. How do they do that? It seems totally magical, but these bioluminescent signals arise from carefully orchestrated chemical reactions that happen inside the firefly lantern. The main star is an enzyme called luciferase, which in the course of evolution has figured out a way to wrap its tiny arms around an even smaller molecule called luciferin, in the process getting it so excited that it actually gives off light. Incredible. But how could these bright lights have benefited some proto-firefly? To answer this question, we need to flip back in the family album to some baby pictures. Fireflies completely reinvent their bodies as they grow. They spend the vast majority of their lifetime, up to 2 years, in this larval form. Their main goal here, like my teenagers, is to eat and grow. And firefly light first originated in these juveniles. Every single firefly larva can light up, even when their adults can't. But what's the point of being so conspicuous? Well, we know that these juveniles make nasty tasting chemicals that help them survive their extended childhood. So we think these lights first evolved as a warning, a neon sign that says, toxic, stay away, to any would-be predators. It took many million years before these bright lights evolved into a smart communication tool that could be used not just to ward off potential predators, but to bring in potential mates. Driven now by sexual selection, some adult fireflies, like this proud male, evolved a shiny new, glow-in-the-dark lantern that would let them take courtship to a whole new level. These adults only live a few weeks, and now they're single-mindedly focused on sex. That is, on propelling their genes into the next firefly generation. So we can follow this male out into the field as he joins hundreds of other males who are all showing off their new courtship signals. It's amazing to think that the luminous displays we admire here and in fact everywhere around the world are actually silent love songs of male fireflies. They're flying and flashing their hearts out. I still find it very romantic. But meanwhile, where are all the females? Well, they're lounging down below, surveying their options. They have plenty of males to choose from, and these females turn out to be very picky. When a female sees a flash from an especially attractive male, she'll aim her lantern in his direction and give him a flash back. It's her come hither sign. So he flies closer and he flashes again. If she still likes him, they'll strike up a conversation. These creatures speak their love in the language of light. So what exactly do these females consider sexy? We decided to conduct some firefly opinion polls to find out. When we tested females using blinking LED lights, we discovered they prefer males who give longer lasting flashes. I know you're wondering what gives these males their sex appeal. Now we get to see what happens when the lights go out. The first thing we discovered is that once a male and female hook up like this, they stay together all night long. And when we looked inside to see what might be happening, we discovered a surprising new twist in firefly sex. While they're mating, the male is busy giving the female not just his sperm, but also We can zoom in to look more closely inside this mating pair. We can actually see the gift. It's shown here in red as it's being passed from the male to the female. What makes this gift so valuable is that it's packed with protein the female will use to provision for eggs. So females are keeping their eyes on this prize as they size up potential mates. We discovered that females use male flash signals to try to predict which males have the biggest gifts to offer, because this bling helps the female lay more eggs and ultimately launch more of her own offspring into the next generation. So it's not all sweetness and light. Firefly romance is risky. For the most part, these adult fireflies don't get eaten because, like their juveniles, they can manufacture toxins that are repellent to birds and other insectivores. But somewhere along the line, one particular group of fireflies somehow lost the metabolic machinery needed to make their own protective toxins. This evolutionary flaw, which was discovered by my colleague Tom Eisner, has driven these fireflies to take their bright lights out into the night with treacherous intent. Dubbed femme fatale by Jim Lloyd, another colleague, these females have figured out how to target the males of other firefly species. So the hunt begins with the predator. She's shown here in the lower left, where she's sitting quietly and eavesdropping on the courtship conversation of her intended prey. And here's how it might go. First, the prey male flashes. Do you love me? His own female responds, maybe. So then he flashes again. But this time, the predator sneaks in a reply that cleverly mimics exactly what the other female just said. She's not looking for love. She's looking for toxins. If she's good, she can lure this male close enough to reach out and grab him. And he's not just a light snack. Over the next hour, she slowly exsanguinates this male, leaving behind just some gory remains. Unable to make their own toxins, these females resort to drinking the blood of other fireflies to get these protective chemicals. So, a firefly vampire brought to you by natural selection. We still have a lot to learn about fireflies, but it looks like many stories will remain untold, because around the world, firefly populations are peaking out. The main culprit? Habitat loss. Pretty much everywhere, the fields and forests, the mangroves and meadows that fireflies need to survive are giving way to development and to sprawl. Here's another problem. We've conquered darkness, but in the process we spill so much extra light out into the night that it disrupts the lives of other creatures. And fireflies are especially sensitive to light pollution because it obscures the signals that they use to find their mates. Do we really need fireflies? After all, they're just one tiny bit of first fire diversity. Yet, every time a species is lost, it's like extinguishing a room full of candles, one by one. You might not notice when the first few flames flicker out, but in the end, you're left sitting in darkness. As we work together to craft a planetary future, I hope we can find a way to keep these bright lights shining. Thank you.
I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I think it's just a really good summary of what we talked about so far, and she just has a very good way of talking about that. Okay, so now we will go ahead and talk about how we can ID fireflies and eventually segue into talking about species that we can find here in West Virginia. This is your typical firefly morphology. couple key features that you want to look for in the field. We already discussed the head shield, which is called the pronotum, and the markings on the pronotum can vary by species. The central pronotal marking might have different coloration on the sides. The dark mark might be arrow-shaped or teardrop-shaped. There's also this part of the insect between the head and the rest of the body called the scutellum, which can also vary in color. On the wing covers, the elytra, the presence of these stripes, elytral stripes, sometimes you don't see them or they can be very prominent. There's obviously the light organs, which sometimes they do vary by species, and it is one way that you can tell males and females apart with particular species. You have these little dots, which are called stomatophore pores, and basically they're anchor points for the muscles, if you will, of the lantern, to be able to flex and move those lanterns so you can so they can flash the display where they want to. Each of these segments are called tergites, and sometimes the presence of a color on one of the tergites can make a difference. The tail of the firefly is called the pygidium, and sometimes that can be shaped differently depending on male or female. I think that's about it. And you know, if you can't tell by morphology because there's a lot of overlap with certain genera, then you have to look at the reproductive parts of the male. And so here's just a picture of how you tell different species apart for the male, just out of curiosity in case you were wondering. And so some scientists, they actually have to use a little insect pin to roll it out of the body of the male, and then they'll pin the diagus on the pin right next to the male. And that's one way that you have to tell some species apart. We'll talk about daytime firefly species first, so those that do not flash, that you can find any time of the day first, and then we'll move into your nighttime flashing ones. These are sometimes in the literature called your dark fireflies. We have 5 species confirmed in the state, and there's still potentially 3 more out there. This one has already been out for a couple weeks, and it's actually probably past peak now in most parts of West Virginia, but I just found this recently over in areas like Tucker County, where, you know, as you go further north in the state, so they are still present. It's called the winter firefly because these overwinter within the furrows or bark of certain trees, and you could be outdoors in late February, early March with 2 feet of snow on the ground, and if the sun decides to come out for a little bit, you can actually find these guys on some of the host trees sunning themselves. So the name is very fitting. It's believed the larvae might be found in pine logs. They have a very wide body, sometimes the presence of yellowish fuzz on them. The wing covers or elytra, they have ribs in them. And on the other side of it, you won't see the presence of a lantern. It's all black-bodied. Now, there's possibly several different species within the eastern U.S. That all look the same, and that's yet to be determined. So you will see a lot of variability. I've definitely seen a lot of them that are more black and don't have the yellowish fuzz on it. This is one of the ones that you can tell male and female apart based on the tail. And they do something called mate guarding because competition for mates is very serious, and it's a type of strategy where males will guard immature females and wait until they're reproductive ready and then mate with them. So there's a really high competition. But if you find the right host trees, you can go there consistently year by year and always find them. So that's one of the cases. You remove the tree, you remove the species. I find these in early summer and midsummer. Woodland Lucy seem to be more common. any open forested area or near forest, you can find them. They have these really flattened antennae that Dr. Sarah Lewis mentioned that are used basically chemical perfume in the air to find their mates. And usually I seem to find these by accident. They just bump into me while I'm working in the garden or something like that. It's like, oh, hey, there it is. There is a smaller one called Tiny Lucy, and it has these two bright red triangular patches on it. These ones you can kind of find in any kind of disturbed areas, like off the side of the highway, stuff like that. Sneaky elf and flower elf. I should mention that most of these fireflies never had any common names until very recently. They were just kind of given names to make them more accessible to people. And they're on the pronotum here, the pronotal marking, you can kind of see that it's pinched here in the middle. And if you didn't get one, I do have 4 different handouts that you can receive later. One of them gives a list of the confirmed and potential species in the state, which covers all of these species that we're talking about tonight. So you can check out that handout too. Like I mentioned before, there's a potential association of some of these species with milkweed, where you find them hanging out on them, and so you can't help but wonder, you know, if fireflies are declining and pollinators are declining, if there's some kind of connection. And we're doing a lot of pollinator work right now for monarchs and native bees, and we have a website that we put up recently, actually created by one of our master naturalist attendees, John Boken, if you met him. He created this website for the Mountain State Monarch and Pollinator Partnership. You can find a lot of information on there about our pollinator efforts, just a shameless plug, and it also discusses the different Asclepias species. Moving into the really cool ones that we want to know about are the nighttime flashers. There's 18 species confirmed and double that potentially. And the flashing patterns, which constitute different species, are only reliable above 50 degrees. And so I don't recommend going out there underneath that, and I've tested it a few times and they don't seem to want to come out. Temperature has a, so with the flashes, how many times they flash within a certain period, they might go slower or faster. It's very temperature dependent. The hotter it is, the faster they're going to flash. And so when it's that cold, it's not going to be reliable what you're seeing. As far as flash colors go, there's different colors actually. The flashes, the definition is just it's an emission of light. Photinus is more of a banana yellow color. Photorus is the femme fatales, which can mimic others. So to other mates, it's usually a green or greenish yellow, but it still can mimic other fireflies. It can even look orange in some cases. Paractimina, we have 1 or 2 that are active right now, which we'll discuss too, and it's more of an orange amber color. Some people see it more as a red color. And working with fireflies, it's really good to encourage younger people to go out because it seems like they can pick up on these colors a lot easier. So it's a good thing to encourage your kids to go out and look for fireflies with you. And so that's more of like the greenish color that you might see on a Photorus and the amber. Some other flash definitions, just a little cut and dry. It just depends on how deep in the weeds you want to get with this. So you can ignore this if you like. But in case you're interested, the flash pattern, that's what the male's using to attract the female. And those flash patterns are a lot of times a single flash with periods of darkness with no flashing repeated at intervals. But sometimes those flash patterns might have multiple flashes within 1 or 2 seconds, and those are called flashlets or pulses. Flash period, that's one of the things that, or flash interval, it's also called. If you're watching a flash pattern, and then it stops. The period when it starts again, that constitutes the flash period. And so I mean, you might see a flash, a couple seconds of dark, and flash again. So when it flashes again, that constitutes that flash period. Flash train, that is something that the synchronous fireflies do. So it's a predictable group of flashes that repeats at regular intervals, whereas these ones might seem more irregular. So the dark period that I've mentioned, this chart might help a little bit more. That's the period in which nothing is happening. And so I might say 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, and that's my flash interval, and I know there's a 2-second dark period in between that. And it makes more sense as you're actually out there and documenting this on paper. Something that's only really helpful underneath the scope, but just in case you're interested, that there's actually tarsi differences, so the claws on the feet, essentially. The photinus, it's simple, whereas the photorus, you do see a forked tarsi. I want to make sure to cover the Big Dipper firefly because this is the most common firefly. This is the Robin, if you will, of the firefly world. This is the one most people see in their backyard, whereas kids have collected and put in a jar. They are crepuscular. They're usually active right before it gets dark, and then that's when the other fireflies start, right after dusk. You can find them in many anthropogenic habitats. They don't seem to mind human presence or disturbance as much. Whenever they're flying, you try watching them before it gets too dark. They actually fly in a J shape. So they'll start a flash and then they'll loop themselves up. And so some flashes actually have a shape to them. And I actually have a male and female with me that I caught outside last night. And this is one of the ones that you can tell the difference between them. The male has just a big set of lanterns, whereas the female has what they call a tornado tail. She just has this one little spot of a flash just to concentrate all the light in one area and point it towards the male. And so I'll pass these around and you can see that difference, but this is the most common one that you'll find in your backyard. And they're pretty big too. You'll see that there is the presence of this yellow on the fifth tergite on the other side of it. They have this look on the pygidium or tail that gives them the tornado tail look. And the female I'm passing around just has this lantern that's concentrated in one spot as opposed to these big lanterns. We'll see if this works. Oop. Click too much. So I want you to watch this male. It's very hard to see, but he dips down and then flies up real quick, and that's the J shape. And sometimes it's more obvious than others. The synchronous firefly that I mentioned earlier is one of the ones that has a flash train, so it has a group of multiple flashes that it does at predictable, regular intervals. It averages about 5 to 6 quick yellow flashes every, with 6 to 9 seconds of dark. And this is around the time that I think that they would start to be active in our state. And probably through like the beginning of July. So this is the time to start looking for it. And like I mentioned before, it's been found everywhere else. And this is the kind of habitat over in Tennessee that's found. There are exceptions though. There's also the presence of this firefly in the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania. They also have a firefly festival, and that is at lower elevations than the Tennessee site. So potentially it has a more robust habitat. The one key feature to notice on this, other than the really wide-bodied and yellow markings, is here on the pronotum it has this very light black edging here. And also near the end here, it kind of seems like it pinches out. And these, so there's been some people that have studied these for a long time, and they can do all sorts of different flashing. And you'll find that's the case with all our fireflies, that they don't always do what you hope they'll do. And so you need to spend a couple surveys with them and kind of get used to what they typically do. But the females, they usually will do just a single or double flashlet in order to, say, to attract the male over. The cattail flash train firefly, there are some fireflies that are called part of the same group. Scientists still do not know if they're one or several species. And so this is one of the ones that some people argue is the same species as the synchronous firefly, even though they have different habitat. So it's yet to be seen if it's the same one or not. They have a flash train of 4 to 7 pulses in 2 seconds, followed by a dark period that also varies. And this is found more, like the name says, more in your wet areas, your ponds and such. So this is the kind of typical habitat that you would find this as opposed to your high elevation forest. So I would think that it's probably 2 different species. It's very unlikely this one's common, but you never know. It's called the little gray. There's a lot of variability in how it looks, but if you have the typical morphology look, that's pretty obvious compared to what we've seen so far. The scutellum has a pale tip to it. Looks like a little candy corn. And sometimes the flash is just not a simple blip. Sometimes it can look like it's a layered flash. So if you want to think of like a 4th of July sparkler, that's more of what that looks like. The creekside tree blinkers, a quick flash every couple seconds. And you can see here on the pronotum, it also has a unique central marking there. It also has really fuzzy elytra. And you can see that it's the body is widest here in the center. And the presence, whether it's on the ground, mid-story, or the top of trees, really matters for fireflies. Some only flash at the boughs or crowns of trees, whereas some will only right above the grass line. And some, you'll find that actually they have a shape to the flash too, where they'll start down below and then they'll zip up to the sky, and so they actually look like a comet. As far as the flicker, that's the example I'm talking about, where it's kind of like more of a 4th of July sparkler. Glow is just a continuous emission of light. We're about to discuss some of those, and the glowworms do that. They're technically not fireflies. They're part of Fingodes or Fingodes, but we're lumping them here just because they can light up too. The shadow ghost, this is actually in our collection. It was collected with a Lindgren funnel trap, basically just a set of funnels that you hang in a tree, and it might have just accidentally hit it and went in there as part of an agricultural study. The males, some of these these ones, the males Some rarely can glow, and some don't at all. In this case, the female is the only one that glows. It's only the size of a grain of rice, and you're looking for that on the forest floor at nighttime. And it just does it right there. And so this is an example of one of those funnel traps that the Department of Agriculture uses to look for, different kinds of pests, and that happened to fall in there. The railroad worm, probably a lot of people have maybe seen this or heard of it. The female exists in a larvae form. Basically, it's just a really big grub, almost. And the males have these really prominent feathery antennae. And this is an example of one of the ones that technically the males have the capability to glow, but they usually don't. And these come out in late summer, early fall. And these ones are actually seem to come out much later than your typical fireflies. Fireflies seem to come out after dusk, and then might range from a half an hour to 2 hours after dusk. This one seems to be from like 10 to midnight and later. And during the day on forest roads, look for hollowed out millipedes, as that seems to be the prey of the female. But I heard reports of this in the Mon National Forest in late August, so you can find this much later in the year. And it does seem to be in a presence near water too. Here's an example of the size difference between the female and the male, just to kind of give you an idea. Quite different. I think this video gives a better example of the femme fatales. Since we are going to kind of talk about them a little bit more here shortly.
If you think there's something romantic about fireflies glowing on a warm summer night, you'd be right. But what you don't see is the dark side of this luminous display. Firefly flashes are a secret code, a language of light. The light comes from a masterful bit of chemistry, a bioluminescent reaction that generates light but no heat. So, what are they saying? Well, males on the wing are advertising themselves to females with a bit of sexy skywriting. Take the common eastern firefly. His signature move? A fishhook-shaped maneuver. Which is why his species is sometimes called the Big Dipper. Her reply is more subtle. A single slow pulse from her heart-shaped lantern. Our Big Dipper comes bearing a nuptial gift. A present of more than 200 assorted nutrients. Kind of like a box of chocolates. Here's the handoff. Some are lucibrufigens, defensive chemicals fireflies secrete to ward off predators like spiders and birds. These defensive chemicals may help protect her. Firefly codes are so reliable that anyone can speak the language. But we're not the only code breakers listening in. Meet Photurus. She's also a firefly. A larger, stronger one than the Big Dippers. But she has a weakness. Her species can't make its own lucibrufigens. They have fewer defenses against predators. So she sets a trap to get some. She mimics the glow of other firefly females, luring in the males of that species. When Mr. Big Dipper shows up with his chemical gift, she moves in, sucks up those defensive chemicals that she desperately needs, then makes a meal of the rest of it. Most fireflies don't even eat during the few weeks they spend as adults. But he's not totally defenseless. If she's not quick enough, he can secrete a gooey compound that sticks in her jaw and lets him escape. Another gift from the master chemist. Hey there, it's Laura. I know you see that subscribe button there. Here's what it'll get you. New Deep Look episodes every 2 weeks.
So the video I'm trying to show you real quick is that you can tell the difference between a Photinus and a Photorus because if you catch it in the hand, they show this agitated display to try to get you to drop them. So if you ever catch a firefly that just doesn't go completely silent, it is a Photorus. It'll just keep blinking like this. So that's a quick indicator of your genus right off the bat. And right now, I'm passing around examples of Photorus that were caught right here back behind the lodge, and they lit up in the net, and I knew right away what I had. And these are different species. They look almost exactly the same, but they had different flashing patterns.
That's the vampire?
Yeah, it's the vampire one. So before talking about any Photorus species, I'm going to, since we're getting closer to 9:30, I'm going to zip through some of these species profiles in case there might be some time to make it outside. Did anyone see if it was still raining? Okay, so we'll just maybe spend 10-15 minutes trying to cover the rest real quick and try to get outside. Maybe we can put some of this to use. Disclaimer with the genus Photorus that there's basically the easiest thing to do is to put it under two groups, versicolor and non-versicolor. They exist in complexes where they can look the same with some differences in morphology, but they have different flashing patterns. And like you already seen in the previous videos, sometimes they mimic other firefly species. And the males also will get on this too to try to trick away other males of the same species in order to find the females. I highly recommend do not look at fireflies that are stationary just in the grass. Only look at fireflies that are displaying by flying. You know that's true, a true flash pattern. If it is stationary in the grass, then it's in all likelihood it might be a female trying to lure in some prey. And there are some species that have multiple flashing patterns, and that's where you just need to go out there and spend enough time in that habitat to get familiar with them. As frustrating as they are, it's still really cool, so just go out there and enjoy it. And this kind of shows a difference in the Photinus versus your Photorus here. And they have a hunched back and really long legs. The most common one you'll probably find, is anyone staying at the lodge that you have to take the tram to down in the river? Anyone staying there by chance? Okay. Well, I highly recommend sometime after 10 o'clock taking the tram. The very treetops as you go down are just filled with this variable triple flash. They will flash 3 to 5 times really fast within only 1 second. This group, they have some variable triple flash just because they can do multiple kinds of species. And there's potentially many undetermined species there. One that is unique to West Virginia is the Potomac firefly. It hasn't been documented in a very long time. Someone needs to go back out there and do so. But there's only one record of it near Romney, part of the Potomac drainage there. And it also does a flash train where it just continuously flashes along the river. There's one called heebie-jeebies. It does have some morphology differences compared to the other ones, and it can be found in the around tree crowns. And all this information I'm showing tonight is also in that table that I handed out to you. And I also recommend, there's a book by Lynn Faust called, it's a Firefly Field Guide, and you can check this out later if you'd like. I'll have it up here. But it also has, for more of your common species, a guide in the front. And there's content online by Jim Lloyd if you really want to get into fireflies and learn more about some of your rare species. We do have some records we only have one county record of. There's where it has a dot followed by a flare behind it. There are some other species that also do this, but it would be great if someone went out there and verified it's still there, or if it's in surrounding counties. So July comets, this is the one that I mentioned where it kind of will start low and it shoot itself up so it actually looks like a comet. And there's a lot of species that will just do a single flash in the treetops, and that's probably a group of several species that are still trying to be determined, which we also have behind the lodge, some of those species. Christmas lights, they're one of the species that can do a single flash, but sometimes the male will also do kind of a jagged, flickering flash. And you can see on this one, it has especially long legs. There's another genus, Paractimina, and you can tell them apart by just looking at the pronotum. It has more of a ridge line on it rather than a groove. So other than you have the amber coloration here, and it's very wide-bodied, very similar in the regard of being wide-bodied like the winter firefly, but you can see the coloration is different, and also it'll actually have the presence of lanterns. There's another one called the spring treetop flasher, which would be should be out now or passing through soon. This is one of the first ones to emerge also with the winter firefly. And this is a comparison of Paractimina with your winter firefly, just to show you how they're different. And also on the bottom, one's completely black-bodied and one has the presence of lanterns. We do have fireflies that are obligates to wetlands and marshes. And these also have a flickering flash, but again, the habitat helps to distinguish it. And this is one of the ones where you can look at the scutellum and you can see the elytral markings are on the sides of the scutellum. So this one comes out a little bit later than the other Paractimina, so that helps tell the difference. And it has antennae that are a little bit longer. And that's to help show another size difference. Just to quickly talk about our citizen science project, I handed out a page about how you can participate. The easiest way to do it is by a phone app. But you don't have to do it by smartphone if you don't have one. As long as you have internet service, you can do it through the website. But I can also make available printable survey forms if you just want to do it that way as well. There's essentially, this is through an online spatial mapping program that has a really long website address, so we created some tiny URLs to make it easier to access. And you can do it different ways, tinyurl.com/lightupwestvirginia, or West Virginia Firefly, or WVDNR Firefly. And the smartphone app is Survey 123. All you need to do is download it on your phone, and then don't touch it after that. You want to visit the website through your internet browser. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on my phone here, like tinyurl.com/West Virginia Firefly. Once you have the app on your phone, you bring up the website. You scroll down to where it says, please enter your data on our online survey. The information is on here too to help with that. You click on the online survey, and then it'll ask you, do you want to open up on your phone, or do you want to open up within the app? You click on open it on the app. And now this survey will always be on your form. You don't need to create an account or anything like that. You go ahead and enter the survey information and hit submit, and then your observation will show up on a map on the website where it lights up West Virginia. There are national opportunities as well to map fireflies, and it's my understanding they just rolled out a program this year where you can try to collect data to the species level, but it's more about overall population trends than it is identifying species. Like I said, there's a survey, a printable survey form I could provide. There are guidelines that if you just email me, I can provide to you. Different survey components, some are required, some are not. One of the only things that's, one of the most important things required is temperature, since all flashes are temperature dependent, which you can just collect that, on your phone, from your car. It's up to you. You can save the survey and not complete it out in the field, go home, and then figure out what the temperature is. We're also recommending you can take short 30-second videos on your phone, which your phones never pick up what your eyes can see, but it helps see the flashing patterns, and it's just another piece of evidence to line up with your survey. I don't think that video is going to work since it's not my computer, but this is the information that I just went over. And there's also the ability to do it through iNaturalist if that's a platform that you already use, but it's not as user-friendly as our website, so we recommend that. And with that, that was a whole lot to cover, but I hope you learned a little bit more about fireflies, and as long as it's not pouring down rain, here in the next 5 minutes, we'll try to go outside and see if we can document some fireflies. They were active as of 10 to 9 last night, so they should be active out there now too, as long as it's not raining. Where the place we plan on going tonight is just right outside the breezeway. There's a little patio that goes outside to an unmowed area, and that's where they seem to be. So just as soon as you reach the breezeway, there's a set of doors, and I can just meet you out there in a few minutes. Feel free to get some handouts, look at the books up here, and I thank you guys for being here tonight.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yeah.
How long is a firefly live?
How long is what?
How long do they live? The firefly?
Just a couple of weeks as an adult.
That's it? So that they just one shot.
Yeah, that's it.
So when do they